But the military's explanation for the events of that night are almost more extraordinary than the claims being made by the UFO researchers.
What happened was that on the 20th January 1996, there were violent storms in Varghina, here in Três Corações. We were having a ceremony. We also had to send some truck for maintenance while they were still under guarantee. So we sent 2 trucks into Varghina for this to happen. To further complicate the story, there were more coincidences relating to the events. At the hospital in Varghina, there was an expectant dwarf couple, which coincided with Eza taking the creature in a truck to the hospital in Varghina.
Well, the town was just going insane because everybody was on the streets, because many UFOs were sighted at that time. So people was just connecting one thing to another.
The tide of panic in Varghina grew. Inevitably, the media quickly picked up the story.
The press got involved in the first day. We have news in Brazil, 8 o'clock, and in that news, you could see the girls in the area, Jardim Andere district. So the press was trying to give information to the public in the first day. And I think they were on our side since the very beginning, which is not common, as we know, in other places. The press is very skeptical.
In general, the major circulation newspapers and magazines, and the national wild TV programs, radio programs, whatever, they all gave us all support.
The original Roswell expert, Stanton Friedman, appreciated the media's attitude.
The Brazilian press played Varghina pretty straight. There's a long article in a weekly news magazine here. I think that encouraged a lot more witnesses to come forward, and that's good. Anytime the press is fair, not biased pro, but fair, treat it the same way you would any other story, significant news story. That encourages people to come forward.
It didn't take the authorities long to clamp down on the favorable press coverage. The military held their own press conference.
When the reporters and the whole press jumped on them, they refused to answer anything, and they said also, you cannot film from the streets our facilities. And they started to frighten the reporters, like, you're going to have a problem. You can't do this, you can't do that.
Some of the gentlemen who performed the capture came to us and gave a report of what's going on. Now, it's not second-hand report. Those reports came from people who actually helped to capture, to hold the creatures. So this is the best report someone can have.
We believe that if this case is definitely proved to be true, then it is as important, if not more important, than the case of Roswell.
I wish the Americans have a report of someone holding the Roswell creatures back 50 years ago.
The notion that the Varghina case is the Brazilian Roswell isn't too far off the mark. I mean, it's got involvement of medical people, of military people, of a number of local witnesses, plus more sophisticated witnesses. It seems to involve creatures and a crash and government interest and U.S. government involvement, too, as far as we can tell. On the other hand, there are a number of differences, too. Roswell, of course, I began the research roughly 20 years ago, so there's been plenty of time. A lot of other people have participated. The Roswell case had press coverage, short-lived. You got to find the right newspapers, evening papers for July 8th from Chicago West. That's a small category. We've been able to find a lot of the people with Roswell because it was a base yearbook, there were reunion groups. You know, it makes it a little easier. An important thing is that we have the testimony from big shot military people, if you want. We don't have that yet, to the best of my knowledge. Open, sworn testimony from important military people involved in the case.
It was a lawyer, Ubirajara Rodriguez, who was the first person to break the story.
What we can say from the evidence, the maximum we can say, is that there is not the slightest bit of doubt that everything did happen. We say this not only because we have heard from people from the town who were indirectly involved, but with people who participated in the principal events.
Although medical staff and the military have given first-hand testimony to researchers, they are unwilling to reveal their identities.
Espero que você entenda. Se você mencionar meu nome, eu serei apagado do mapa.
One of the soldiers was carrying a sack where, as far as I could make out, something was moving inside.
I do not think that any of our principal witnesses are lying. None of them, not the civilians or the military. The statements are concrete, and I believe in the sincerity of all of them.
Well, it was very hard for me to get all this military personnel to give me information, but I got it. And I'm not talking about only soldiers, I'm talking about high-ranking people. I'm talking about lieutenants, majors, captains, sergeants.
Many of the witnesses to the incidents were traced and told not to reveal any more information. Some of the military witnesses who were involved were threatened in a very serious manner by their superiors and told not to release any more information about the case to anyone, even if they did not know who they were giving information to.
The military were threatened by their superior. Don't talk about this to anybody.
But they all told me the same thing, the characteristics, the whole operation, time, who was involved, who was coordinating, what kind of equipment was used. So they all confirmed everything.
One nurse who has been working for the same institution, for the same hospital for over 20 years, was threatened. The principal called her and said, hey, you're not supposed to talk about this to anybody, because if you do, you better start looking for another job.
There are other differences that I'm curious about as much as anything. The description of the bodies connected with the Varghina case makes it sound much more like they were cargo than crew. They seem to be woozy, they didn't have any clothes, the little horns, the color of the skin and stuff. Their reactions did not imply particularly high intelligence. Now, who knows? Maybe this was a crew from a different place, and we don't know what their mental capabilities were or something like that. But you just don't get the feeling, looking at the drawings that have been made, the testimony of the witnesses, that we're dealing with particularly sophisticated aliens here. And I can imagine a cargo craft that ran into some kind of a problem, pilot error is common apparently, in which these guys were set loose and weren't really the operators of the craft. Now with Roswell, I don't have that indication. The bodies seem to be directly connected with the craft, one-piece spacesuits. I'm not saying being nude means anything particularly here, but just a different level of sophistication. I'd also like to know, something we didn't have any capability of doing back in '47, observations of things crashing from the sky, that is, spy satellites. There's an awful lot of sophisticated equipment up there, looking for re-entry of an American satellite, of a Russian satellite, or a flying saucer. So, did we know it was coming down? Was word sent to the Brazilian Air Force? What's the involvement of the American government? Brazilians don't have a lot of spy satellites up there, but the American and Russian governments do. So, there's a larger picture here. I don't know of any previous cases where beings like this were seen before. Maybe this is a new step in what's going on. I don't know. So there are a lot of puzzles here.
3 months later, just when everyone was starting to come